The senator from South Dakota is recognized.
President, is the Senate in a quorum call?
It is.
I would ask unanimous consent that the quorum be suspended.
Without objection.
Mr. President, we hope later today we'll have an opportunity to vote on legislation that will fund the government, provide much-needed support for border security. And while no agreement is perfect and not everybody gets everything that they want, this makes a significant down payment on border wall as well as other border security measures, and at the same time funds all the appropriations bills for this fiscal year. So I hope that as our members review the text, they have an opportunity to come to a conclusion that we'll be able to get the votes that are necessary to move that legislation through the Senate and hopefully ultimately through the House into the President, and that the President will be able to sign it into law. So stay tuned on that, but hopefully that all will transpire later today. Mr. President, tax reform is working. When Republicans took office 2 years ago, we had one goal in mind, and that was to make life better for the American people. And key to that goal was getting our economy going again after years of economic stagnation under the Obama administration. And so we took action to lift burdensome regulations. And in December of 2017, we passed a historic comprehensive reform of our nation's tax code. Why the tax code? Well, because the tax code plays a huge role in the health of our economy. It helps determine how much money individuals and families have to spend and to save. It helps determine whether a small business can expand and hire. It helps determine whether larger businesses hire, invest, and stay in the United States. A small business owner facing a huge tax bill is highly unlikely to be able to expand her business and hire or to hire a new employee. A larger business is going to find it hard to create jobs or to improve benefits for employees if it's struggling to stay competitive against foreign businesses paying much less in taxes. And a larger business is unlikely to keep jobs and investment in the United States if the tax code makes it vastly more expensive to hire American workers. Before we passed tax reform a year ago in December, our tax code was not helping our economy. It was taking way too much from American families. And it was making it harder for businesses large and small to create jobs, to increase wages, and to grow. That's why, after months of work, we passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. This legislation cut tax rates for American families. It doubled the child tax credit and nearly doubled the standard deduction. It lowered tax rates across the board for owners of small and medium-sized businesses, farms, and ranches. It lowered our nation's massive corporate tax rate, which up until January 1 of last year was the highest corporate tax rate in the developed world. It expanded business owners' ability to recover the cost of investments that they make in their businesses, which frees up cash that they can reinvest in their operations and in their workers. And it brought the U.S. international tax system into the 21st century so that American businesses are not operating at a competitive disadvantage next to their foreign counterparts. Well, Mr. President, I'm proud to report that Republicans' economic policies are working. Our economy is thriving. The economy grew at a robust 3.4% in the third quarter of 2018. January marked the 11th straight month that unemployment has been at or below 4%. That's the longest streak in nearly 5 decades. The number of job openings hit a record high in December. And once again, there were more job openings than job seekers. In fact, job openings outnumbered job seekers by more than 1 million jobs. Think about that, Mr. President. More job openings than there are people looking for work. And not just by a little, by a lot, by 1 million job openings. The Department of Labor reports that the number of job openings has outnumbered the number of job seekers now for 10 straight months. Wage growth has accelerated. Wages have now been growing at a rate of 3% or greater for 6 straight months. The last time wage growth reached this level was in 2009, a decade ago. A Bloomberg article from yesterday reported, and I quote, "A strong labor market is proving to be a blessing for job switchers as they pocket bigger raises amid record openings. Median wage growth for those who jumped to new positions picked up to 4.6% in January from a year earlier. the fastest pace since October of 2007, end quote. That's from a Bloomberg article from yesterday. Median household income is at an all-time inflation-adjusted high of $61,372. And the list goes on. Well, Mr. President, that's a lot of statistics. But behind those numbers are American families whose lives are improving thanks to Republican economic policies. American families who no longer have to choose between a car repair and a dentist bill. American families who now have a little extra every month to put away for the kids' college or for their retirement. Thanks to Republican economic policies, Americans are feeling more optimistic and more hopeful about their future. Gallup reports, and I quote, "Americans' optimism about their personal finances has climbed to levels not seen in more than 16 years, with 69% now saying that they expect to be financially better off at this time next year. 57% of Americans rate the economy as excellent or good, according to Gallup, the highest level since January of 2001. And 69% of Americans say now is a good time to find a quality job, which is the highest percentage that Gallup has ever recorded." Mr. President, there's optimism in this country. There's optimism in families, there's optimism in small businesses, there's optimism at every level when it comes to this economy and the jobs and the wages that are being created as a result of these economic policies. Mr. President, when it came time to draft tax reform, we had hoped that it could be a bipartisan endeavor. After all, many of the ideas that we included were the product of both Republican and Democrat proposals. Someone who's been around tax policy for a number of years, and I served as a member of the Senate Finance Committee when tax reform was written. I've seen many of the bills that have been introduced. I led a task force a few years ago that took ideas from both sides and incorporated them into a document that we put out there that provided many of the ideas that were included in tax reform, and some of those were Democrat ideas. But, Mr. President, what happened, unfortunately, is that Democrats were not over the 2016 election, and they absolutely refused to collaborate on tax reform legislation. And now they're trying to pretend that the economic progress we've made over the past 2 years doesn't exist. One Democrat presidential hopeful here in the Senate went so far as to actively mislead Americans about tax reform in a recent tweet, falsely suggesting that tax reform was raising taxes for the middle class, when instead it's lowered taxes for an estimated 90% of middle-class Americans. The Washington Post called her tweet, quote, "nonsensical and misleading." And presumably most Americans are well aware that the size of your tax refund has nothing to do with the size of your tax bill. That statement, Mr. President, made by a Democrat candidate for president, is peddling a blatantly false narrative in hopes of scoring political points. And for that statement, she was awarded 4 Pinocchios by the Washington Post, which is about as big a whopper as you can get. Well, luckily, Mr. President, no matter how much Democrats try to pretend that our economy isn't improving, they can't hide the reality that Republican economic policies are making life better for American families. Mr. President, I'm proud of everything that we've accomplished so far, and we're going to continue to keep working to ensure that our economy can thrive for the long term and to make sure that every American has access to a secure and prosperous future. Mr. President, I yield the floor.